All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Of Like Minds video podcast, episode 7, featuring a very awesome friend of mine, Jasmin Atiles. Super awesome woman, UCLA, Latina, killing it in the game right now, still out in LA thriving. Jazzy, thank you for coming on and giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. So just kind of starting where you grew up and what that was like navigating through that.
Yeah, so I'm from the Imperial Valley, and most people are like, I know where that is. And I'm like, do you though? So if you look at the map of California and you go all the way like past Coachella, past like the Salton Sea, and there's this little tiny town right next to the border, that's where I'm from. So it's Imperial Valley. It's about like 3.5 hours away. And I grew up there pretty much my whole life. It's a small kind of like agriculture town, so you'll see a lot of fields. Nothing fancy like here in LA. You don't see these tall buildings. It's just nice and flat.
So smaller town, born and raised Imperial Valley. What was it like growing up there, and what was the demographic like there?
Like it's my hometown, so to me it's always going to be like a special place, right? Like
Mhm.
you grow up in your hometown, to you that's kind of all you know, right? When you grow up there, it's like a bubble. So you're in this bubble, you're in this small town community. It's a good mix. I mean, being next to the border, um, there's a lot of Mexican people, Hispanic people, um, Caucasian. Like it's a good little mix. Growing up though, like it's a small town, so you know everyone. My high school had a graduating class of like 150 students.
Whoa.
So it's like it's you know everyone, and you know the next class or the class before you, and I mean, when you grow up there, it's kind of like all I knew was school and sports. Like that's what kept me going. And I was like, well, listen, I'm smart. Like, you know, I had like big dreams and big goals. And
Mhm.
so that's always been something I've had since I was little. Like, yeah, it just kind of carried through. And I think that's the one like saving grace I had of like that are giving me these new opportunities of like, okay, great. I was great at academics. I
Mhm.
was part of different clubs. I played sports. I did like year-round swimming since like the 5th grade. So I always was involved in something.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, it was just a constant like go, go, go. Um, and but even then, like you know, you got one mall, you got you got a small movie, or like when you the first time we got an In-N-Out, I remember that was the biggest thing, and In-N-Out had been around for so long, like
Mhm.
here in LA and stuff, and then for us, it came like in high school, and it was like the brand new, like oh my god, like I love this, like this is amazing, and
Yeah.
like so it's kind of funny going back to my hometown now because it's kind of like you can see the growth that has happened.
Mm.
Like we got an Olive Garden now, y'all. Like we coming up. Like get that garlic bread. But yeah, it was a small town, a good mix of everyone. I never really experienced like anything difficult, if that makes sense. Like
Mm.
there, like I didn't have to worry about like being bullied or anything. Like I was always in like the good classes, if you want to say.
Mm.
So that is an interesting point. Like if you take a look, like, well, what if I had been on this end? Because I know so many people from my hometown that have stayed in my hometown,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like, well, why is that? Or like, why is it that some people have gone off to college but they went back? And it's kind of like, what does that mean for my
Mm.
town? Like, was our school preparing us enough? Um, did we have like the sources to fund ourselves to go off to college?
Mm.
Like, what does that mean? And when you come from a small hometown, it's like it gets so scary sometimes when you go off to like these bigger colleges, just because like I remember, and I'm going to tangent it now into
Yeah.
a little bit of UCLA, but I remember showing up to my freshman orientation, and you know, like we all had like groups of little sevens. Like this would be your group for the orientation period.
Mm.
I remember everyone in my orientation group was like, "Oh yeah, well I had like 10 AP classes, and I got fives on
Mm.
everything." And I literally was like, "My school only offered 3 of these, and to be honest, I only passed one. Like,
Well, I was just gonna ask you what you talked about your graduating class being 150 and going to a bit of a smaller school. I was gonna ask you what those resources were like at your school, and if you were able to even take advantage of that, just if it was limited or not.
I mean, like, it's so weird to think about because when you're in it, it feels fine. Like,
Hmm.
like, great, I have AP classes I can take. I have teachers that will support me. And I have teachers that I can go to for advice that want to see me succeed. And obviously these were like my teachers. Other teachers, I mean, it's like a mixed bag, right? Like you get some people that are like, get in my class, do your work, leave. And but outside of that, like I never felt like, oh, I don't have the same, like in order to get into the school, like I need to be doing this, this, and this, right? Like I think I felt like I had enough to keep me going and go into college. But then when I was in college, there were moments of like, well, why didn't I learn this? Or
Mm,
moments of like, am I dumb? Like I was like number 1 at my high school. Why do I feel like I'm number 107 here in this class?
mm,
And I think that part was probably one of the hardest things to like grasp, in terms of like, did I get prepared enough? Did I learn enough?
yeah.
And it's like, is it just me not being able to adapt to this new environment? Is it me not taking advantage of some of these resources that
Hmm.
I didn't really need to ask for in high school? So it was kind of like a new scary territory to be like, well, this professor has like 300 students versus my
Mm,
one English teacher who had a class of like 50 max,
yeah.
so it's like you build those interpersonal relationships in high school that I feel you don't necessarily get to build in college sometimes, because it's at another level.
Yeah.
And so you have to be
Absolutely.
comfortable and you have to break that. And I think when you grow up in a tiny little bubble,
Yeah.
like you get used, it's literally that sense of community and you feel it. So sometimes when
Hmm.
you go to a bigger thing, you're like, right, like a small fish in a big pond kind of thing.
Yeah. So kind of going back to when you were talking about going to orientation and this transition to UCLA, huge public university, coming from the small town that you were from. You kind of said that you experienced a little bit of those difficulties in class. So what was that transitional period like?
Well, it was weird. Like you go from tiny hometown to big Los Angeles. And thankfully my roommate also went to my high school. So I think that was one of the kind of almost like a little saving grace there too, to have
Mm,
someone that I can like talk to if I felt like overwhelmed, or like there's all these new people, like how do I interact with them, like where are they from, like how, you know what I mean, and like trying
mhm.
to navigate the space of like what's going on. It's literally a brand new world. It's like a brand new start, like here you go, like throw you off and see if you swim or sink.
Mhm.
um and so I think, which brings me back to thinking, well, why is it some people went back to my hometown? And I'm like so thankful, like I had my roommate to be able to talk to her, to be able to be like, I'm like stressed out. Like I was, when I started at UCLA, I was a psychobiology major.
That's right.
So I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor, like this is gonna be great, this is gonna be amazing, like I'm gonna fulfill like so many things. And it was something that I also, when you go in and transition and you think you know what you want to do, and then you realize, holy shit, this is hard. Like
Mm,
this is actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. And like navigating, like relearning, it's like a relearning type of thing of like, how does my professor like this, how do I have to interact with these students now, who is it that I can go to, like there's all these different factors that I think when you're in high school, when you might have the same teacher for like your sophomore year and your senior year, like
hmm.
you have that family that goes with you, and at school it's like a brand new territory. So transitioning over, like I would like to say like, oh yeah, it was so easy, like no it wasn't,
Yeah.
like it was hard, it
Yeah.
was. And I don't, like, you have to find ways to be like, okay with it, you know? Like you have to find ways to acknowledge like what you're feeling rather than bottling it in. And like, I think that's such a crucial thing for any freshman going into college, right? Like it's all these like questions, it's a mixture of excitement and nerves and like fear and happiness, like all these mixes of emotions. And like for someone who, you know, like I experienced that, but like having to do it on a larger scale, it's like it's hard to grapple with sometimes. And it's like, can I succeed? Can I stay at this prestigious school and ace everything or get that GPA that I need to pass on to the next year? Or how am I affording all of this? And it's all these other questions that like make you kind of grow up a little bit. I mean, you know?
Yeah. So what was that conversation like when you started psychobio and then you eventually made the major switch? What was that conversation even like? Because you have to imagine like you're going to school and like, I know some people, they kind of stick through it because they're like, I'm investing all this money. So that's a huge decision. What was that conversation like?
Nah. So, so I was so convinced I was going to go to pre-med, be a doctor, right? I was so convinced, but the truth was not really. Like my senior year, when I found out that I got accepted into UCLA, I spent so long debating between biology and communications. Those
Whoa.
two, I struggled so much. And I put my gut decision, rather than trusting what I wanted to do, I fell back onto what do my parents want me to do? I've been told, you know, make money, get a job, make money, do that. And it's like, well, do I really like science? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm good at it here in high school, but what does that mean on a bigger level? And is that what I want to be doing for the rest of my life, right? But like coming from a Hispanic family, you carry that, right? Like your grandparents are like, oh, when you're a doctor, you can take care of me, right? So there's this like added pressure on you, and you're kind of just like, oh, okay, well, got to be a doctor. And your parents are like, well, you know, make money. You're like, okay, well, doctors make a lot of money, right? And then it's like, even talking to like some teachers, it's like, well, I'm struggling with this. Like, do I want to do biology? Like, I think communication sounds really fascinating. Like, it's actually really cool. An opportunity to learn something different. And it's like, well, why would you do communications when you can do so much more with biology? Like, what opportunities does that give you? And so that's kind of what made my choice of like, okay, well, I'm going to pick biology. Let's see how this goes. And in those 2 years, I struggled through some of these classes that were so hard for me. Like, I thought I was so smart. And then I got into these classes and I was like, oh, girl, like, like you need to put more effort than you did in high school, basically. Like,
Absolutely.
you need to study 2 times as much. You can't just like go to class, listen, absorb it, and then be like, great, I'm good for that final or whatever. It was like you had to put that extra effort. And it was a mix of like, okay, well, I have school, I'm like exciting, like trying to make new friends, like trying to get involved in like a sorority. Sometimes like you make mistakes, right? Your freshman year, you learn like, maybe you should hang out with these people so much anymore. And it's like that balance of trying to figure it all out. And for me, it's like, I think I got to a point where there was one class. I will always remember this class. It was, well, I don't remember the title. I just remember the class and being in there. But it was a math class, and it was like the last one of the series. And it was like, I'm sorry, if whoever out there likes this, good for you, but I hate it. Like probability and theory, and like it like my brain took so much to try to figure it out, and it made no sense to me. It made no sense. And I got so frustrated. I'm like, why do I have to take this class to be a doctor? Like, what about this has anything to do with being a doctor? Like, it drove me nuts. And the professor, did not like the professor, did not think he was a good professor. He would call people out. Like, it was just a toxic kind of class.
Mm.
And I failed it. Like, I failed it. I had to retake it. And the second time I took it, it still didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, I have a different teacher. Like, hopefully this works now. And it was still so hard for me. And then on top of that, it was my sophomore year. I had to finish all of this physics before being able to qualify for this prerequisite to continue on with the major that I was in. And I was like, okay, well, I'm looking at the time and I'm looking at my class schedule. Where is that going to fit? Like, what does that mean? And right. And I'm also adding this added stress of like, I'm going to graduate in 4 years. Like, I'm going to graduate in 4 years. Like, I have to, or else I'm behind, or, you know, I'm adding my own pressures on myself.
Yeah.
And of like trying to be the best or whatever. But, and it's like, and so I was like, okay, like what programs are available for me? And there was a study abroad program that everyone goes to, like Sussex University in
That's
England.
right. Yes.
And you take basically the whole summer there. You're taking physics, but you're taking like what you would do a year of at UCLA and condense that into 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And like everyone's like, oh, it's easy. Like, you can totally get an A when you go out there. I'm like, cool shit. Like, I'm about to finish physics in 3 months and go to England. Okay. Yes. You know? And so I was like, okay, great. Like, there's that. Like, it was like, I felt like a ticking time bomb in order to get to that prerequisite to continue with my major, right? Like, I had this schedule, but then there was all these other factors that I still needed to fit in. And it's like, fuck, I failed math. Like, what can I be doing in order to like continue on? And like continuously talking to my counselors, like, what else do I need? They're like, oh, well, you also need this physics class, or the psych class. It was a psych class.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, how do I get that class? Like, it's closed. Like, what do I do? You know? And so there's all these other like stressful factors that you're like, oh my God, if I don't get in, like, I can't continue on. And so I was grappling with all of this, right? Grappling with the fact that like, oh my God, like, am I going to go on to my, like, continue on with my psychobio major? Like, do I need to change my major? Like, do I need to be like just a biology major? Do I need to be just a psych major? Do I even like this stuff? Like, it was all of these questions. And I went to England that summer and before junior year. And I remember being like, we had like little, what they called them, flats. So it was kind of cool. Like, I was like, this is nice. Like, I got my own room, like, shoot, my own bathroom. I was like, I can seriously live here. And so we would take our like physics classes there. And then we would like have homework and we would go back to our flats. And that was like restarting at another school too. So then you have those little factors of like, well, I don't know anyone here. Like, and I'm in England, like another freaking country. Like, what, like,
it's a lot.
have someone to talk to about how I'm feeling. And like, I had this little prepaid phone. Like, I didn't want to hack my iPhone. So I had this little prepaid little phone.
Yeah.
And like, you can't text. I had to stick my head out the window to be like, hello, can you hear me? Like, it was crazy. And I had a moment, and I don't know how I had this moment. And I had a moment of like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to be in this major. I'm like looking at my physics textbook going, I don't care about this. Like, I don't want to do any of this. And it was so hard for me to be like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Like, I'm in a freaking different country right now. And like, I don't know if my counselor is going to see my email because how many hours are we ahead? And like, it was all this stress. And like, I remember trying to call my mom on my prepaid phone to like out the window, like going, hey mom, like, because my mom's kind of like always been my confidant. Like, I can talk to her. I feel comfortable talking to her and getting like an honest answer and like supportive answer. So I felt safe going to her and being like, I'm going to do this. Like, I think this is what I'm going to do. And I mean, she's like, you do what you need to do, basically. Like,
Yeah.
there was no added pressure of like, well, what about being a doctor, or what does that mean? And I had a moment of like, okay, well, fuck, I'm changing my major. What do I do now? Like, and it's like, okay, well, there's all these, unfortunately, at UCLA, there's like prerequisites, right, to go into certain
Mm-hmm.
majors. So
Yeah.
it's like communications, what I wish I would have started with. Like, you read it and you're like, oh, this sounds so cool, like I love it. And then like in the fine print, you're like, you need to have so and so by this time before you're a junior. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess not that. And so it was all these factors of like, in retrospect, maybe I would have gone about it differently, but in the time I was like, okay, well, what can I do? Like, what do
Yeah.
I like? And I've always loved English. Like, I've always loved literature. Like, I've always loved books. I've always loved stories. And what does that mean? And like imagining in your head and like picturing all these things, and just, I love that so much. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I've taken a few English classes here at UCLA and I really liked them. Like, I enjoyed those. And so, I took a look at my classes. I'm like, what have I done? I was like, oh, well, I've done this and I've done that. And I was like, I think I could switch into English. And I remember emailing the counselor, because I think like 2 days or 3 days later, we had to pick classes. Like, we would get those like time frames where you had to
Yeah.
go online. And
Stressful. So
so
stressful.
it was the most stressful thing. So imagine doing that, having that like coming up, and then being like, well, I'm having a whole change of my life right now. Like,
Oh my
and
God.
it's like, okay, like emailing them, trying to get a hold of them, being like, hi, this is like a super Hail Mary throw to you right now. Like, I want to switch into the English major. I promise you I'm going to switch into the English major when I come back. Like, how can I be doing this? Like, I'm in England right now. Like, if there's a
Yeah.
way I could go to the offices at school, like, what can I do? And thankfully, the counselor for the English major department, she was like, oh, like, you took this class, like English Comp 4D or whatever. And it was like, so that can actually fulfill one of the requisites for the entry English classes in order for you to continue on. So it like helps. She basically replaced one class for another. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, like, okay, great. And like, she held my spot in one of the English classes. So I was like, yes,
Wow.
like, okay. And I switched. No, it was easy as that. I had signed up for my classes that I would be doing when we came back from summer, right? Like that first semester or whatever.
This is junior year, third year, right? So you
Yeah.
come back that summer. Cool. Okay.
So going into my junior year, I would be an English major.
Mm.
And I remember I was like, oh my God, like I was so excited. And then I still had to do physics all summer. I was like, okay. And it's so funny because when I came back my junior year, and I went to the English like department area and like switch it out, and they were like going through my transcript and they're like, oh, you studied abroad, like what did you read, like Shakespeare, and did you get to experience this, like, right, like, oh, I'm an English major, it's the perfect time. My ass didn't even think about that. My ass was just like, I'm focusing on switching and
Yeah.
that's it, and I'll finish physics. Like, I didn't even think I could switch my classes out there. And so when I told her, I was like, oh no, I took physics all summer. And she just, her face was like, okay, like.
Well, I was just gonna ask you, just going from, and for those of you that are listening and that don't know, there's North Campus and South Campus at UCLA, and so you're going from a South Campus major, predominantly sciences, all that kind of stuff, to North Campus, a little more open-ended, a little bit more majors where you can question things. And so, what was that like? You obviously kind of saw it already in your professor being like physics. So, what was that like?
It was, I mean, for me, it felt like a weight off my shoulders, going from South Campus to North Campus, not only for like my own like personal, emotional, like what I want to do kind of thing, like that weight was off, but also even like, I just feel like the pressure within the classes, like, come on, like everyone in South Campus wants to be like pre-med, or it's like highly competitive.
Very intense, very intense.
It's very intense. And you feel it within the students. And when you go to North Campus, there still is that competition, but it's more of like your own kind of journey in those classes, where it's like, I don't think people are really like, what did you get on your, what score did you get? Like, oh my God, you know, like I need to beat you so I can be number one in this class. Like there was none of that. And that was just such a relief. And it was such a relief to be able to speak about things, or like, what does this period mean at the end of the sentence? Like, you know, like you use your brain in a different way. And I loved that. And I thought that was amazing. And it was still hard. Like there are still some students that were so eloquent, and like, you know, you're like, when you're sitting in your class going, okay, like this person is clearly using their big words here. Whereas I would have been like, you know, like this paragraph is about love or something, you know, it's just, it's funny. Like you have different levels of everyone at school. And sometimes it's hard to not compare yourself, to be like, should I be on that level of like going that deep into the book? Or is what I'm doing enough? And I think that's one of the hardest things to grapple with. It's like, but I think definitely going from South Campus, where I think that pressure was up here. It was just easier to breathe. And I think people were more willing to work together in terms of like, let's all try to figure out what this means, or like group projects, like, right? It's more holistically, like you have that opportunity to move and speak with people on a different level, like intellectually, and like literally pick someone's brain and be like, well, why is it that you see it that way and I see it this way, and have that conversation. Whereas in a science major, it's like, well, there's not really that wiggle room, right? There's like there's a definite answer. Like, here's the answer to that problem. And that's it. There's no gray area. Which I think North Campus majors, and they're so different, right? Like you have your theater majors, you have your DESMA majors, you have English majors, you have like, you know what I mean? And it's just a different flavor in a different world that I think is so much broader. And you get to experience a little bit more in those areas. So when people ask you like, oh, well, you're an English major, well, what are you gonna do with that? You know? And it's like, well, actually, you could probably do a lot, like beyond just being a teacher. Like so many people think, oh, you're an English major, you're gonna be a teacher. I'm like,
that whole stigma of just already being pigeonholed into doing something, and just gonna ask you, you're kind of beaming with this like glow and just this excitement, even talking about it now, which is awesome. So I guess, how did that affect you? Like, with that attitude change, just your last 2 years at UCLA, you're doing a major switch, but you're realizing that the environment helps facilitate for better, just a vibe for you to learn. And so how did that affect you moving forward into ultimately finishing at UCLA?
I mean, it definitely helped me feel less pressure, like less stress of like, am I going to graduate? Like I failed a class. Like, what does that mean? You know? And it was more of it became like a focus of like, well, what am I going to do next? Right? Like when people are constantly like, well, you're in English, what are you going to do? Right. And it's like, well, my mom's a teacher, right? I see that side. I've seen that. I don't think I got the patience to deal with kids. Like, love them, but I've been in my mom's class, like, you know, and it's kind of like, okay, well, what is it that I like, right? I ended up getting also like a theater minor because I was so interested in art, but there's no art minor at UCLA. So there's only, and then I was like, okay, well, what's the next thing? And I was like, theater, I think. You know, like question mark, like, does that logic make sense? And it was another area that's a little bit different from English, but it dived into like, okay, your play, your screenwriting, what does it mean to act? And like, it was just another creative space, right? And so having those two things my last 2 years, I think really helped me think about later what would come later, I guess, because I still didn't know what I was going to do once I was almost close to graduating. help kind of build and solidify, like, actually, I kind of want to do this, you know, like, this is really interesting, like the mixing of this, and what does that mean? And okay, if I can't get it applied to film school right now, because I'm already a junior, you know, like, what does all this mean? Like, what are the, this sounds so bad, but I kept going for like, well, I can't get this, so what's the next closest thing, right? You know, and like, maybe in retrospect, I would go back and do things a little differently and be like, girl, like, go apply, fuck it, like, stay here for 6 years, you know? But it was one of those things where it's like, at the time, I was so focused on trying to finish in 4 years. Like, I was so focused on that it consumed me a little. So it's like, okay, well, can't do communications. Well, English is really similar. Well, can't do art or the film right now. Well, you know, theater's a mix of those two. And it would give me that opportunity to kind of explore both, right? So kind of taking those and going forward with them, and feeling lighter and feeling a little bit more motivated to find what interests me truly, I think is what kept me going. You know, like, you have your classes, and like, college is hard no matter what major you're in. No matter what major you're in, college is hard. Like,
absolutely.
It doesn't, me saying like, oh, well, when I switched to North, it became sunshine and rainbows. No, there was times where I still cried. I had a 40-page paper on why chivalry does or does not exist. Like, who cares? Like, who cares? And I remember being so stressed out and like going to my it was like your last, like, it was your senior thesis class for the English major. And I was like, why do I have to write 40 pages on this? Like, why? What does this do to anyone outside of this classroom, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's learning that too, of like, well, it's like, I don't want to be a professor. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, I love reading and I love the stories there, but sometimes writing about some of the material in there, I'm like, whoo, okay, let me think. Like, let me sit, like, you know, and you're like, oh man, I'm only 35 pages in. Like, I need 5 more. Where do I go back and like add something? Or like, you're like, oh, does this make sense? Like, you know, like, everyone goes through that.
Yes.
If you do not go through that, okay, like, you're on another level. But you can't look me in the eye and be like, well, you know, on one paper I kind of like was like, let me add a few sentences here that kind of sound like you're saying the same thing just in a different way.
Absolutely. Like, 40 pages.
You know, of like, why chivalry is alive and dead. I think I definitely wrote chivalry is dead. Sorry, y'all, whoever thinks it's dead. Love y'all, but it's dead. Yeah, no, it was, I mean, those last 2 years, it was a blast. And you're thinking about just the different experiences you have, right? Like, not only did I have like my schoolwork, I had like Samahang. Like, I had a community of people and other activities outside of my work that like helped me feel good. And like, and that was from freshman year to senior year, like having those. And like, some people watching this are probably like, Samaha, is she Filipino? Like, I don't see it. She just said she was Mexican and Puerto Rican. Like, what?
It's open to anyone.
Yeah, it's open. And it's like it's an open community. And I think that was such a blessing, because I made so many friends that, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have made. Like, I would have thought, I'm not Filipino, I can't go in this group, you know? But it was such a blessing to have a community. And another culture that is so similar, I felt, to mine, like, in terms of like our beliefs and what we feel passionately about, and like growing up with family pressures, and like you know, they align so well. And I think that was such a saving grace for me. It was having people that I now can call lifelong friends, to keep me going. So when I was like switching completely, it's like, oh, well, there's someone else who kind of did something like that too. Like, let me talk to them. Or like, what do you think about this? You know what I mean? And so I think that was really nice too, to also just continue to have that going through and finishing out. And I don't think to be honest, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, man, if I didn't have some of these like resources, like, would I have graduated too? Even with like being so happy in my new major, like, because there's still challenges there.
Absolutely.
Like, you
And
know?
it's the things outside of the classroom in college, I feel like is where we learn the most and where we grow the most. Those interactions outside, like you said. So shout out to Samahong for taking in Jazzy and giving her many lifelong friends. I think on top of that too, just I know for those that maybe just going to college or in college, I know a big thing too that I would be wondering is just how do you afford to do things and how did you balance, being in a major, very rigorous major, then transitioning extracurriculars, and then I don't know if you did work during college or kind of
Mhm.
what was that like?
So when was it? I think my junior year. Yeah, my junior year, I was like, okay, because my first 2 years, I was science major,
Hmm.
super stressed. I was like, I don't have time to work.
Hmm.
Like, I thank God for financial aid and like
Absolutely.
and like I'm so thankful for like my parents too, because my parents definitely helped me out. Like
Hmm.
they were there for me. They never, like, as sometimes as embarrassed as I was to like give them the phone call to be like, say, can you help me? Like,
Yeah.
they were there and they helped me out. So um obviously sometimes that's not always available, but at one point my junior year, I was like, okay, I feel comfortable, like, new major, I feel like I got this. And I was like, I should probably get a job. Like, so many places like, well, you need experience. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I still didn't, I was kind of dumb and was like, didn't apply to internships when I should have. So I was like, okay, well, a job, right? That's experience. So I got work study, and I got work study for the Hammer Museum.
That's right.
I used to work at the Hammer Museum, and it was a good lesson.
How so? How so? How so?
In terms of just like patience, because my job was literally the person that goes, no photos, please don't touch. I was that person with a pencil skirt in the corner that's like,
Oh my.
and
Yeah.
like I was told you're not allowed to talk to the patrons, like you must be visible at all times on the security cameras. It was like a security job, right?
Hmm.
And I was like, it used to get so quiet. Like there would be no one in the area that I was at. And I'm like, can I sit down? And I would go sit down in my little chair for like 2 seconds. And then we had earpieces and they would go, Jasmine, we don't have eyes on you. Where are you? And I'm like, here. Like,
Oh my
didn't go
gosh.
anywhere. Like, don't worry. Like, it like literally taught me some patience of being like, this is silent. What should I be doing? And I remember they used to give us like a tiny little, like the size of an iPhone, like imagine like a notepad paper with
Yeah.
a little stick pencil that doesn't have the eraser on it.
Oh God.
And I'm like, why did they give us this? Like, like what am I supposed to be doing? So I used to take my English major prompts. I would write them down on that paper and I would use those 4 hours, because I think I only worked like 4 hours, like, right? It was like half part-time. So it was
Yeah.
like four
Yeah.
hours a day and it's work study. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use this time wisely if I'm going to be staying here doing nothing.
Absolutely.
And so I would write my prompts and I would like, well, let me think about that. Okay. Like, like writing my essays on these papers. And then, but when I went back home, I would just rip them out the page and then I would stick them in my pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go back to my apartment at the time. And yeah, that was my first like real job out of like college,
How
right?
long did you do that for?
I didn't survive that long.
So two. I'm just kidding.
It was a really short period of time. I think it was like maybe like 6 months, 4 or 5,
Oh, that's
4 to 6 months.
that's a
But
lot longer than it
um
made it seem.
I hated it so much because it was so boring. Like
Yeah.
it was mind numbing. It literally was like I'm looking at the same art a billion times And it's like, I love art, but if I can't speak to anyone about it, or like, I'm a social person. So when you're telling me I can't talk to anyone that I see that comes in, and I have to be quiet, and literally my one thing is like, no photos, don't touch. It gets a little like, like, come on, what can I be doing? And I remember talking to one of my roommates at the time, and I was like, I need a new job. Like, what can I should start looking. And she literally goes, oh, I have a friend who works at Nike Town in Beverly Hills. And she's like, I think they're looking for people. And I was like, really? Like, please, anything, like, give anything, like, I'll give her my resume. And thankfully she like hooked it up. She called her friend for me. Like, I sent her my resume, and literally that same day she goes, the interview is tomorrow, can you go? And I was like, oh my God, like, okay, sure. And thankfully I remember this, the dress attire was like dressed in like your Nike best, right? Like dressed like you would work out or something, like casual. It wasn't like a suit or anything.
Yeah.
And I didn't own anything Nike because at the time, because to be honest, it was a little pricey. Like, well,
yeah.
It's a little pricey.
Yeah.
Like, your girl got her leggings from like Forever 21 for like $10. Like, you know, like, they were fine. Yeah. But I remember going to my roommate going, do you have anything? Like, I need something. And thankfully she had like a black zip up that said like Nike on it. So I wore like my black leggings, and I borrowed her running shoes, which were Nike. Oh, and it was just so funny because like I was like, okay, well, here I go. And it's like, this was like a group interview. It was my first time doing a group interview too. So I was like, okay. I remember going, it was Beverly Hills. It was also my first time in Beverly Hills. I was like, whoa, what is this area? Like, oh, it's that song, right? Beverly Hills. And I remember going into Nike Town. It was 2 stories, and they told me, go wait up in the 2nd floor by the basketball area. I was like, okay, cool. Sat there. There's a bunch of other people sitting there. Then they took us to this back room, and we had like a circle, and like they had their little questions that they had prepared for us. And I was like, oh my God, okay, great. Like, I got this. Like, oh, what's a difficult encounter you faced or something? I'm like, easy, got that money. Like, let's go. Like, you don't know who I am. Like, I live for these. And then, so they did those questions. Then they had like a second round of questions. And then the last part was, I want you to go on the floor and we just want to see what you do. I was like, what kind of psychological test is this? Like, I don't know anything about retail. I know nothing about these shoes. Like, am I supposed to help sell these shoes? Like, what do I do? It was the most awkward, like, part of the interview. And I could see everyone else's faces. Like, I remember there was one dude, he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm so good. Like, I'm going to go sell shoes. And I'm like, bruh, like.
So what did you do?
We were on the 1st floor. They put me in the women's running area. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you know, when you just like awkwardly stand. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask people. So I went up to the other workers that were on the floor and was like, hi, I'm in an interview right now. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. They told me to go on the floor. I'm going to ask you for advice. Like, should I be helping you? Can I help you? Is there something that I can be doing? Like, I know I'm new, so I can't really speak to any of this. And I guess that must have been a good way to go about it. Cause like, they're like, oh, like, can you do this for us? And so they must have like, you know, like put in a good word for me. Like, how did she go about? But I remember being like, this is the most awkward part of this whole, like, why? Like, why did you send us out? And then, but end of story, basically, I got the job, so woo!
Yeah. And so this is now kind of transition. This is post-grad, right? When you first got it, or was it, you were still?
No, I was still in
school,
junior year.
Right? So you kind of go through, you finish UCLA, and now we're in post-grad, the scariest thought ever for anyone. And you work at Nike. We're going to fast forward a little bit. I know the Nike Town in Beverly Hills. you can tell us about what happened there. But this is already the time, for those of you that don't know, Jazzy and I were actually roommates. We were apartment mates. And so we kind of, had a lot of conversations every single day about post-grad struggles. And our joke was bread and water.
Bread and water. Bread and water.
But those were the days. But I think just sharing with us what happened at Nike and what it led to eventually.
So post-grad, right? Great. Still working at Nike, still have a job, blessed, because rent is pricey in LA. But I was still trying to figure out, well, what is it? What am I doing? What am I doing, right? And eventually I figured out post-grad, I was like, okay, entertainment business. I want to work in entertainment. How do I do that? Where do I apply? But when you have a job, sometimes you kind of get stuck in your job. And I enjoyed working at Nike. It was fun. It was a good time. I was there. I got to go to some cool events. I really enjoyed it. So I didn't super focus on applying to a lot of things. Or when I did apply, it would go through, hear nothing, go through, hear nothing. And it's it started getting a little I kind of got in a little slump of well, I'm working at Nike, I'm cool, right? And then they closed Nike. So Nike Town closed, and unfortunately we were told we'll help you with transferring, but just know we might not be able to find you a place. And I kind of took that door closing as okay, Jazzy, it's time to really focus on what you want to do and where you're going to go next. And I remember those doors closed. I didn't have a job for a few months in there. And then one of my old coworkers hooked me up with a babysitting job. But even then, it was a small source of income, but I was I need to do something. I need to launch off into my career. But it was constant of well, you don't have this experience. There's no experience on your resume for anything related to entertainment. And I was okay, well, what do I do? Right. And I was looking for internships. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me is I would find these really cool, amazing internships and then find out, well, you still have to be a student. And I was I'm oh, well.
But you're not anymore. You already graduated. Yeah.
I graduated. I was is there a grace period window after that? And it's it was such a downer looking at some of these applications, because I was well, I don't have that. Okay, I don't have that. I don't have that. And it was hard. It was hard to be well, I don't have any of this experience. How do I get it? And it was constant applying, right? And I finally found an internship in Burbank, and I was blessed. I have an internship. It was unpaid though. So as usual, most internships are unpaid. So I still relied on, I would go to my internship in the morning, and then I would speed drive back down the 405, back to go pick up the kids that I was babysitting.
Bless.
To bring them to their house in time, in a reasonable amount of time, because love this family, but man, they were time sticklers.
Yeah.
And so I was okay, well, I have some type of income here. So that's why the joke bread and water comes alive, because I would eat bread and water. And then for lunch at work, I would go sneak and be what leftovers are there? But yeah, no, that was a hard transition over of you have a job that you kind of but then there's the slump of trying to find kind of that motivation to keep applying when you're just getting rejected all the time. And you would think well, I went to UCLA, don't people want me?
It's a big one.
I went to one of the most prestigious schools, so many people apply to UCLA. What does my college degree mean? If I can't even get a simple internship or an entry-level job. And it was so disheartening. The amount of times I had moments where you were probably in your room dancing and having a blast. I had my door closed and I was crying in my pillow. It was one of those times where I was I'm going nowhere. I'm I'm just going to go back to my hometown. Right. Like, and then you have those, and I feel like anyone post-grad kind of has some dark moments if you're struggling to figure out like, well,
Absolutely.
why can't I be where I want to be? And I think sometimes that's what our generation struggles with, right? Like we want to be there already. Like we have that goal, we have that drive.
Yeah.
But when we don't get there, that's when we kind of feel like you get a little depressed and it's hard. Like it's so hard. Like, and eventually like my internship thankfully led into a job, right? And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I have my internship, great, like I'm doing this, well, what can I learn, what can I be doing, like trying to ask. And it was like a small little internship, right? So the team was really small, and so I had like 5 jobs in like one, right? So sometimes that would be a little stressful, but then like, great, I'm getting all this experience that I need to get to where I want to be. And so it's like these little tiny little steps that you're taking. And even though it's not that giant leap that you want, like it's taking those small wins and being like, okay, great, I can keep going. Like, this is good. And then you get to a point, right, where you're in a job where you're like, okay, I want to do more. I want to do beyond this. Like, what's my next goal? And it's like, okay, I have this dream. I want to be at this company, or I want to be doing this kind of job. And it's like the applying continues, right? Like it's a constant, like you apply again and you're like, great, I have experience now. I should be able to get it. And you put those applications in and they come back to like, I'm sorry, like not yet. And you're like, you're literally yanking your hair out going, what do I need to do? Like, what do I need to do? Like, rereading your resume going, is my resume not like special enough? And like, what do I need to change? Like, you're constantly like asking yourself all these questions, because it's so frustrating, right? When you apply to a job and you're not seeing who's reading it or who's looking at your information. And it gets so frustrating because you're like, I just need a chance. Like, let me talk to you.
Absolutely.
Like, let me like pick my resume, please. Like, and it's like, it gets, and then when you're pursuing, like for me, like pursuing this career in entertainment, right? And you're constantly being told, well, it's who you know. And it's like, well, does it have to be? Like, I know no one. Like I'm from the Imperial Valley. Like I know farmers, I know teachers. I don't know movie star people or producers or directors or someone who works in that entertainment industry. Like I don't have any of that. Like, so what does that mean? And even within my own company, it's a small company. And it's not like any of these people, like talking to them, it's like, oh, sorry, I don't know anyone there. Like, oh, maybe here, you should try here. And it's like, no, I want to go there. I want to go that one, like the star. Like, and it was grueling. The amount of times I went online, I went on like, I think it's entertainmentcareers.net or something for like, I signed up for an account. I was like, oh, I'm going to check out what's going on. And I applied like no tomorrow. I think I still have on my laptop like a little folder that has like my screenshots of everywhere that I applied.
Oh
it's
my
a little,
God.
it's like, it's dense. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I only applied to like 5 places. No, I applied to like 50 places.
Yeah.
And it was a constant like check. It was another job. To go online, check, is there anything new? Is there any updates to my application? Is anyone going to respond? And so I think that was so hard because you're dealing with, you're in your post-grad life, right? You're trying to figure out, okay, well, what am I doing? Okay, also, how do I afford rent? Also
simultaneously, right, while you're doing
also doing that, also dealing with like your personal relationships, like whether you have a significant other or you don't, or and you're dealing with it's just all of these factors that make you grow up real quick.
Absolutely.
Like, and it's so weird. Like, it's so funny because I was just watching the Some Good News show, and there was a section about graduation, and literally one guy goes, so what's next? Literally, like, that question I think is just for everyone. Everyone has that. So what's next? I graduated. What's next? And it's dealing with all of this. That's the scary part, right? Because it's life. You're trying to figure it out. And I mean, eventually, like, you'll get there, right? But sometimes it takes people a little longer than they ideally would like.
Yeah.
And
that's okay.
And that's okay. It took me to get to where I'm at. It took me 2.5 years to finally get an interview to, like,
Postgrad, you're talking about postgrad.
Yeah, postgrad. Yeah. Like, finally get an interview of somewhere that I wanted to be. Like, I got my internship, I got there, but then, like, I finally got that interview. Like, I remember reading the email to this company and going, oh my God, like, screaming, yelling. And I was at my job, which was still that little small studio. And I was like, ooh, I'm still at work. I gotta keep it cool. Like, I gotta make it and get the job before I can be like, sorry, here's my 2 weeks.
What was the small company that you were at? I don't know if you're able to disclose that. What was that one?
It was a small post-production studio.
That's what. Yeah. Awesome.
So again, trying to figure out what I'm doing. And so I was like, well, this sounds kind of cool. And so they did, like, a lot of editing, sound editing for, like, a bunch of CW shows. They did a lot of dubbing for, like, animes and, like, video games. And so it was, like, a small private company. Like, they owned themselves. Like, it was a really tight-knit group. But it was kind of one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm doing this, but within this company, there's only so much growth here, right? So there's only so many opportunities that are available. And I was like, okay, well, let me dive deeper now. And so, having my goal in mind, you keep shooting for it. And
of course.
And I think
that breakthrough, so that breakthrough happens. You obviously, that reaction at work, almost 3 years of you, blood, sweat, and tears, nights crying, all these, things that, I don't want to take you back to, but it's nice in hindsight. What did that mean for you? What did that mean to you when you finally broke through?
It, like, validated so much. It validated my hard work. It validated, like, I can be more than just some small girl from a small middle of nowhere town. Like, I can succeed. I am something that can go far, and I will go far. And no matter how many times I feel sad, or how many times I feel like I'm getting rejected, or whatever that is, there is so much more that we have inside of us that can keep us going. And I think even if sometimes, like, you can have this huge flame, right? Like, I'm pumped, like, I'm going to go get it. But then there's other times in your life where your flame is about to go out. Like, you're about to give up. You're about to give up and go, there was a time in this search to try to apply to this job, where I ended up going, I was like, I'm not gonna get there. Like, I'm constantly being told declined, like, sorry, your application. And it got to a point where I was, like, literally on the phone with my mom and being like, so how do I, like, become, like, a substitute teacher? Or how do I, like, should I just become a teacher? Like, it literally got so down, like, where my flame was this big.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's the hardest part, where you go into an industry, the entertainment industry, like, so many people, right? So many people apply to it. So many people, whether you're working in live action, whether you're working in animation, whether you're working in, like, commercials or whatever that is, there's always that, like, stigma. Well, if you leave, someone can easily fill in your spot. Someone wants your job. And so it's like knowing the vastness of how many people want your job or want what you want also. And it's like, when you finally make it to that point, it's like, I am that person. Like, I can do this. I can fulfill my dreams, and I'm not going to stop no matter what. Like, like it's one of those things where it sounds so cliche of like never give up, but it's really that, especially for here in LA, like, or whatever city you're from. It gets tiring, it gets hard, and I think that's the hardest part of like life, is like having your own like flame to keep you going on, right? I think that's something everyone struggles with at some point. Like, you can tell me you have all the money in the world and are happy with life and everything, but there's still something you want to pursue. And I think when you lose sight of what you're trying to get to or your goals in life, I think that's when, you get in your slumps. And I think our life is too short to get in those slumps, and we should, no matter how hard it is, like, try to keep that positive mindset of like, I can do it. Like, I can, no matter how many times I'm told no, someone's gonna say yes. Like, someone's gonna give me that chance. And it's like, it's constantly pushing that door and that wall that's in front of you, and being able to be like, I made it. I'm here. I'm in. You're not going to kick me out. Like, I am going to pave the way further. And like, I don't, even now, I'm still so early in my career where I'm like, what does that mean in the entertainment industry, right? Like, what does that paving and making that way and being that leader that you want to be mean? And also, like, what does that success mean to me, right? Like, what if I'm happy at like a certain level and I don't want to be the CEO? Like, that's not my goal, And it's like, it's also being like in your life continuously to find the things that will help you grow and challenge yourself and make you feel alive and like good, I think. So when I finally got that email, I was like, yes, like, this is my chance. This is my time to prove it. Because I feel like I've been proving it since day one, where I was like, I struggled, I made it, like, you know what I mean? But there's always that new barrier that you have to overcome. And I think it's those little wins, because it's going to happen again where I'm like, great, like, what's my next challenge? Like, what's my next barrier to overcome, to be like, actually, I can do that. Whether it's trying to get a promotion within my job, like, what does that mean? And like, okay, well, I'm being told no right now, so how can I continuously grow and live life and and I honestly think if I would have gone back, and if I was still a biology major, I probably wouldn't be as happy as I am right now. I mean, I can't say that for sure. I will never know, but I'm happy with, despite some of the super lows of this whole journey, like, it was all worth it. Like, I'm in a place now where I can say, like, I am so happy with my career. Like, maybe if I would have changed something back then, I wouldn't be where I'm at now, It's like all these like philosophical questions of like, oh, if I made this major change, and like, I would have never met these people and would have never had these experiences. And so I think we need to just cherish those moments and acknowledge, like, yeah, that sucked. Like, I was in the darkest part of my life in this moment, and I felt depressed, but it shaped me into who I am right now, and where I can confidently talk to you and say how I feel so much better, and I feel stronger, and I feel like I still have that flame that will keep going.
Absolutely. So what would you say to your 13 or 14-year-old self, having gone through all this, having gone through the transitions, having persevered through the adversities, and still going through, obstacles? That will always be a thing, but just everything you've navigated through, environments, workspaces, any sort of space, what would you just say? What would you share to whoever's listening, viewing this, 13, 14-year-old, kind of starting out, kind of beginning of high school? What would you say to them?
It's a hard question.
Take your time.
That's a really hard question. It's like, I would want to hype myself up, that's for sure. I'd be like, you 100% that bitch. Like, yes. But also, I'm only 13, so I maybe wouldn't say that just yet. Man, I mean, kind of like what I was saying earlier, just like don't take no for an answer. Like, always question why. Like, never give someone's like, well, you can't go in that job because you don't have that experience. And I was like, why can't I? Like, what, why not? Or, so never accept no, always question why. Be less hard on yourself on certain moments of your life. Like, it's not the end of the world if you fail a class. It's not the end of the world if the first job you apply to tells you no. Like, it does not mean you are less worthy. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you're not going to succeed. Like, you will go far, you know? Like, I think for me personally, because I know how hard I am on myself. And I know a lot of people are really hard on themselves too, even if they don't want to admit it, where they're like, well, I want to be here by this age and I need to be making a ton of money by this age. And it's like, no, you don't. You really don't. Like, you don't. I think that was probably is knowing, like, you got to keep going, and you just don't take no for an answer. Like, continuously push, like constantly push. Even when you don't feel like pushing. I think it's like I don't even know the quote. I'm terrible. But there's a quote that's in my mind somewhere buried about like when you don't want to wake up at 5 a.m., but then you still do it at 5 a.m. and like you push yourself. You know what I mean? Like, because that's only going to make you so much better. And it's only going to, it's like doing the things you don't want to do sometimes. It's like, you got to do them. And it's like, I wish I could tell myself that too. Like, don't take the easy way. Like, you trust your instinct and trust your gut. If your gut is saying, well, that way kind of sucks and that looks really hard, but it's probably going to have the better outcome, take that way. Don't cop out and be like, I'll do it later, or, oh, I'll figure it out in like a month. Because I think that was the point where I felt the lowest, when I would push it away and not take those challenges and not do something that's motivating me. It was literally like a slump. So I think that would be like, continuously push, and even if it's scary, like, go for it, girl. Like, you know, or a guy or whoever, like, I don't know who's listening to this, but you do you keep going, like it's gonna happen. It'll work out. Like, there is no need to put a pressure on yourself that you're saying, like, I'm not where I should be, like, I'm late. No, there is no such thing. There is no such thing as that. You can be 82 and still like, I'm gonna learn how to do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna be challenging. It's not like it's gonna be like snap your fingers and it happens, but it's going through those challenges and accepting them and taking them on like you can, basically.
Absolutely. And I think you're an amazing example of that. Coming from a small town and navigating through, one of the greatest, universities in the world, and going through the major change and figuring out post-grad life, and, our joke of bread and water, and literally making the sacrifices of whatever it takes to get what moves you and to get what really helps you wake up every single day to keep you motivated to where it doesn't feel like work. And I just want to say thank you, Jazzy, thank you for sharing your story with us today. It means a lot. And hopefully, whoever is viewing this or listening or tuning in can use this, her narrative, as inspiration in your own life. and just to continue pushing on forward. So thank you again, you guys, for tuning in on the Of Like Minds video podcast, episode 7. Jazzy, thank you so much. You're the
Thank
best.
you.
We will catch you later. Thank you.